Secretary Gavin Williamson admits there was, quote, unfairness in the system. Israel says Bahrain...
Morning, everybody. New order placed to sell short at for euro 118.927. Order placed, sell short 118.927. I think it moved too fast, too far. Let me see. And I will have to cancel this order. See? It's all about how this candle will end up or down. Yeah. Okay, we'll wait, yeah? I think we'll have a chance to execute. Still waiting. Anyway, guys, hope you had a good evening. New start, new day. And don't forget to get a strategy. If you don't use, if you're not our client or our customer, please subscribe to our channel. If you want to become a day trader, let us know what you want to find out. If you have a problem or don't understand something from our strategy, I'll be glad to help you. Okay, it's look like it just doesn't want to take my money, right? Let's wait a little bit and see what's going to happen. New short position open for euro at 118.927.
Welcome back to the European market open. 36 minutes into a trading day that is negative, but off its lows for European equity markets as Nasdaq futures flirt with the flat line. Let's talk about banking and a conversation we tried to bring you yesterday, but we'll see if we can do better today. Just like its European peers, Pan-African banking group EcoBank faced a sudden contraction of revenue and a surge in bad debt from the coronavirus crisis. Lagos-listed shares in the lender have slumped more than a third since their March high, and the bank, which has operations across 33 different countries on the continent, as well as offices in China, France and the UK, has also named a new chairman in the midst of the crisis. I'm pleased to say he joins us now. Alain Nkonchu, EcoBank Group Chairman, took over the role on June the 30th. So thank you very much for joining us, Alain. What is the biggest challenge that you have faced operationally with the coronavirus?
Thank you for having me. I guess one of the biggest challenges that we have faced as a group operationally was essentially to make sure that, the bank continued to serve its customer and clients, in a seamless way. And I am happy to confirm that this has more or less been the case. And we have been able to serve our clients, throughout this pandemic, and even, reduce the cost of offering that service to a certain extent. Now, obviously, with this kind of shock, comes the notion of the right liquidity challenge, and also, the vulnerability of the balance sheet. This is something that we assess, on an ongoing basis, and we believe that, somehow this crisis will essentially be transitory, and eventually that will find some medicine or vaccine down the road, which will allow us, to basically go through this low cycle. What will happen by and large, within this crisis? The world has faced a simultaneous shock from the demand and supply side, and which have actually brought those economies to virtual standstill. And to back it up, government have had to expand, fiscally and in a different way across the board. This has also been the case in Africa to some extent, with the bilaterals providing some helps and also some deferred payment on loans. And we believe that fiscal expansion has gone a long way to help those countries for the very first time applying a countercyclical policy whereby central banks have actually been able to cut rates, provide additional liquidity. And this is one of the very first, situation where we see certain banks in countries like this one expanding, yes, at time of shocks. So now the question is, where do we go from here, with regard to the pandemic? And really,
yes,
we have
and so you point out there some of the positives and some of the things that central banks have done to support the economies in Africa. But that still leaves you, no doubt, with a headache in terms of loans going bad, loans needing restructuring. What percentage of loans at EcoBank do you think will need to be restructured in 2020?
No, it's actually too early to assess that. And I think you also have to understand that within this kind of environment, it makes perfect sense to actually allow banks to give it a bit more time to see what will actually become, a structural impairment within their balance sheet, post, after we actually have a true measure about the economic impact, of this crisis. And the way we view it essentially is a twofold, right? We are in a situation whereby we are still taking advantage of, the fiscal expansion that has been provided to some of those countries, and discussing with governments, how the best trickle down they could actually offer within the real economy. And I believe, and we believe, at EcoBank that, this crisis will eventually be transitory, which means that some of those companies who are facing challenge will eventually recover. Now, that's one of our long-term view, but we also hope that this is actually going to be materializing very soon, which means that, between now and the end of the year, probably additional fiscal, measure will be needed to support those economies. And surely central banks have actually offered some room of breath, to those banks in a form of, in a form of forbearance, which allows banks to actually take some time to consider, how structurally impact their balance sheet will be. And that's the process we are going through. And by the way, we view this kind of shock situation as an opportunity to basically challenge our capital in a most efficient way by sizing opportunities that are being left by, the constraint that some of the financial actors are having just because of the nature of the crisis. And we believe that, working very closely to some of our customers, we can actually have the best risk-adjusted reward, in terms of expanding our capital and helping those companies that we believe will go through this cycle.
Okay, and so Alan, you point to a lot of reasons to be hopeful there, and banks in Europe and the US are keen to cast themselves as part of the solution rather than the problem when it comes to getting through coronavirus. Maybe that's true of Africa as well, but maybe African banks will have to face some distress. Do you expect the banking sector to be somewhat distressed?
Listen, again, everything could happen, right? You know, it depends on how long this crisis will last eventually. And obviously, if, you know, within 2 years' time, you know, we still haven't found any meaningful product, it's pretty clear that global growth will actually probably linger, you know, after this strong rebound that we are facing. In which case, yes, you should expect, you know, some damage, some permanent damage within the balance sheet of some banks, essentially also because, you know, by and large, Africa is commodity driven, and which in this kind of situation would be a less demand. So we have to make the contingency plan, you know, to have to face a situation where, yes, we could face, you know, some challenge within the balance sheet. But like I said, this is not our base assumption. Now, even having said that, you see, we also understand that macro policy has been relatively helpful, but even in a situation like this one, they will need to actually still even more more expansion in order to actually cushion the impact of this crisis. So a lot of things still need to be done. But as a bank, we are still, you know, in the wait-and situation with the view that this is actually going to be a transitory phenomenon.
Alan, thank you very much. Really good to get your perspective. Alan Enconchu, the EcoBank Group Chairman, joining us here on the European Market Open. Let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash then. Some of the top stories, top corporate stories we're covering here at Bloomberg. Oracle is entering the race for TikTok's US business. That is according to the Financial Times. The move may complicate Microsoft's attempt to take over the operations. The FT reports Oracle may also partner with TikTok's US investors on a bid. They include General Atlantic and Sequoia Capital. Boeing is planning more job cuts than its original 10% target. It is preparing a buyout offer for employees for a second time this year. The so-called voluntary layoffs come as the plane maker tackles declining demand for jets. CEO Dave Calhoun says the layoffs are hard but necessary. Employees will get more details next week. As accidental payments at Citi is now heading for regulators and the courts. The Wall Street bank mistakenly paid about $900 million to lenders of Revlon. Citi described it as a, quote, operational mistake. Some have opted to return the cash, but others have not. Citi is now suing Brigade Capital Management, who, at least initially, refused to return the money. No comment from Brigade. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Back to the geopolitics now, and we will attempt again our conversation around Belarus, where thousands of workers joined mass protests against the president, Alexander Lukashenko, as we mentioned earlier. So what future here? What is the role of Russia? Let's get to our conversation with Alexander Baunov, Carnegie Moscow Center. He joins us now. Alexander, good to speak to you. So ultimately, is it up to Putin what happens here? What is it that Russia wants to see happen in Belarus?
First of all, Russia wants the union between Belarus and Russia to remain. Putin blames Gorbachev and Yeltsin for destroying the Soviet Union. The only thing that remained of this big Russian and Soviet empire is the union of Russia and Belarus. So what Putin wants to keep before he leaves is this, the last remnant of the union.
And what kind of support would you expect Putin to send to Lukashenko then?
That's an important question because there is a big difference between Ukraine and Belarus. In Ukraine, only a part of population is considered in Russia by the Kremlin and by the public opinion as friendly towards Russia. In Belarus,
I'm placing stop on profit for Japanese yen. We, as you can see from our ticker, we were holding two positions. We're still holding at 105.567 and 105.917. I put stop for both of positions at 105.547.
The half of Ukraine. You don't see anti-Russian and even anti-Putin slogans in Belarusian streets. That's the big difference between Kiev and Minsk.
Yes. And that seems to suggest that President Putin could be happy to see some kind of transition from Lukashenko to another leader. Is that a likely outcome?
Yes, exactly. If Putin intervenes with a brutal way, we can expect to see these anti-Russian feelings and anti-Russian slogans. So the best solution for him would be not to support Lukashenko, who is maybe lost already, but to find a form of smoother transition from not very anti-Russian Belarus to the future more democratic Belarus that will remain not anti-Russian and want to go immediately to join NATO and other Western structure of security. Can you hear me?
So will this develop into another election? Yes, Alexander, we can hear you. Will we see another election taking place then, or will this be a handover of power in another way?
The recount of votes is not possible because, as far as we know, a considerable number of ballots has been already destroyed. It can be what Lukashenko is proposing. Maybe is told to him by Putin personally or by the Kremlin. He proposes the changes of constitution, some mysterious changes of constitution that allows him to stay for a while and then to transfer the power to the next leader. Right now, the population, so the protesters, and they represent, to my opinion, the majority of the population, don't accept this solution. So we don't know exactly which kind of transitional solution will be proposed. But in the interest of the Kremlin, and somehow in the interest of Belarusian economy as it is now, with all these big Soviet factories, heavy industry, and so on, to find a transition that make Belarus democratic country, but keep strong ties with Russian market and Russian economy, because it's heavily depending. All these Belarusian heavy industries that gives the majority of jobs are heavily depending on Russian market.
Alexander, thank you very much. I'm very glad we managed to re-establish that line to you. Really good to speak to you and get your analysis. Alexander Baunov, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Moscow Center. Thank you very much for joining us. Coming up on the program, what would it take to get oil back to $70? We spoke to one guest earlier on, said he doesn't think we will get there. We'll put that question to Christina Aquino, who leads our Markets Live team here in Europe. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
stop on profit for euro at 118,907. Okay, I'm placing stop on profit for 118,907.
Welcome back to the European market open. 52 minutes into a trading session.
And position is closed for euro at 118,907. We have £200 in profit.
There's something of a very August feel to some of these markets, Christine, and yet we're talking about US equities, the S&P in particular, trying to take out all-time highs, which seems kind of astonishing when you think about all of the headwinds that markets face right now. Where do we think that US stocks are heading?
Yeah, it's a good question, Anna. And I think, you know, for the remainder of the summer, I think they're going to do what they do best, which is slowly drift higher in the absence of any solid catalyst. It is interesting that, you know, we've gotten a little bit of developments both on the stimulus front and the U.S.-China trade talks, just in terms of us knowing that these are going to continue and will continue to be risks for markets into the autumn, but not necessarily yielding any concrete results or developments as yet. And so I think in the absence of any major changes on those two fronts, stocks seem happy to just drift higher. It is interesting, though, that there is a bit of a contrast with some of the other risk indicators and other asset classes. We are seeing a bit more of a buildup in just a bit of risk aversion or tentativeness in FX, credit, and fixed income. And the question, I guess, is when the equity shoe will drop. It might not be until September.
Yes, indeed. And so if equity markets are quite willing to